Alright, so I think I missed like patch 8.13. I was on like hanging out with family. I went across the country, but back now. We'll do an 8.14 review. I'm gonna do a relatively quick one. So, most important thing in this patch, you can now switch Aatrox's wings to unfurled, which is crazy. Alright, so his early game is kind of broken, so these nerfs are mostly targeted at his early game. He loses a little bit of base damage on his Q, he loses a little bit of minion damage on his Q. His Q early game is actually insane, especially at like level 1. The damage it can do, plus the fact that it has like potentially 3 knockups tied to it. Crazy. Base health is fine as like a nerf to him too. His base health is actually insane. Umbral Dash, I feel like anything to do with his E and making it more accessible or like smoother is probably fine because he feels like clunky to play sometimes, independent of his power, and then removing some of that early game power to like later game where he'll get more attack damage and he'll get this cooldown scaled down. So that's the appeal there. And then this is something that people were complaining about, where like you pop back up from your R and your Q's on cooldown, so your champion's worthless because his Q is his entire kit. So this is a feel-good change. This is them moving some power to like late game, and then these are early game nerfs because his early game is actually kind of silly. So Fizz, they're giving Fizz back like a mixture of his old W and his new W. So he's still going to get resets on it. It's going to have a lower cooldown, and he's going to get mana back refunded like normal, like it works right now. But it's not going to mark people for a crazy amount of damage after the fact. Instead, it's going to give him a damage buff for the next few autos. So for the next 5 seconds, he gets a damage buff. So, and this is in addition to like the bleed that it puts on people too. So this will give him a crazy amount of sustained damage. The on hit is like what previously people were using as like a way to enable Fizz to split push. So split push Fizz back when he was like building like off tanky was really hard to deal with, primarily because he had so much like free damage in his kit. So when you get like this bleed plus you get this damage on hit, like this could bring back like a kind of Fizz that like doesn't necessarily need to burst you. He can like whittle you down. And it also means that even maybe AP Fizz can now deal with tanks better in a side lane that has more of like a win condition through split pushing, or a way to like break open the game in mid game through split pushing, because he has like this extra damage for tank killing instead of straight up burst. He will have a little bit lower burst overall, but if he gets multiple autos off, or if he can like sit on somebody, like if he's fighting a tank in a side lane, then he's going to have a lot more damage, especially because like the cooldown and the damage buff are really aligned. All right, so Jinx. Jinx is getting 50 base health, which is actually like fairly significant. Like that's like 10% of like her durability early. She's going to lose that health by level 13. This is a significant buff. Jinx is already above average, and so this will probably put her into that normal place she's in, where she has like a 53-ish% win rate in solo queue, and she's always been like a staple. She can take over games really easily. If she gets ahead, she can become really hard to deal with in fights because of her insane amounts of range and the fact that she scales really well, and she can do things with that range really easily. So she's like the classic solo queue hyper carry, and I think like they initially nerfed like base stats on AD carries, but like she can be really hard for like shorter range things to contest, especially in lane because of her rockets, and then her base health, like being her being this much more durable means that she will be like really hard to like contest like at early stages. So probably overbuffed a little bit, especially for solo queue. She might not see much competitive play because she's still like punishable, like you can still get to her and punish her, but definitely really good in solo queue. These changes are aimed at Karma's laning, so she's gaining 6 armor and she's gaining 3 mana regen early. This evens out by level 10 because you're losing 0.3 per level. So by level 10, your mana regen's the same. By level 10, you don't normally have mana problems anyway. So this is a decent mana buff for lane. This is 6 armor for lane, which is pretty impactful. Splash radius, this thing's impossible to miss anyway when you mantra it. So like I don't think it like matters there, but like that helps the base splash a little bit. Like maybe you can hit creeps with it and then like it'll splash onto the person, so maybe that'll help a little. The detonation damage from Soul Flare going down I think is fine because honestly it's way too reliable for what it does. So Twitch gaining base health is alright. I mean, he's another one that's been like a solo queue staple. He has a pretty decent win rate right now. They buffed Expunge recently. Now they're buffing his base health at the start of the game, so I think like his early game will be much improved compared to what it was previously. And I assume that he will see competitive play and probably plenty of solo queue play. He has good build paths too, in spite of like him being like a credited carry, because he can build Bork into Hurricane, which is fine because then you spread Bork damage, you spread his poison, which resets your Q. And Anyone that can build Bork right now is decent. He can also build Storm Razor and go into crit from there, and he gets a lot of burst coming out of stealth that way, and it's a little bit more of like an even crit path. So he has like some liberty with like what he can build, and you can tailor it to like what you're playing against or what you want to do. And then his expunge damage is increased pretty significantly, so his early game is getting a lot better than it has been in the past, and he might be able to contest some of these short range mages, which he hasn't been able to before. Also, his ultimate makes him relatively safe later in the game into those champions, so if he can get out of the laning phase relatively safely, then he should be in pretty good shape, because it's really hard to contest him in team fights sometimes, especially when he gets to open up a little bit late after things have already broken down a little. So RA, this is 0.4 seconds charm buff. Mana a little bit helps, but I mean ultimately you're not spamming charm very much, so it's not a big deal. So this means that you'll be able to get your Q really reliably, but I think the bigger part of this is that this means that it'll be easier for other people to follow up off your charm, especially when they have tenacity, because that means the difference between like this being like a 0.6 second CC and like a 1 second CC, right? Like basically, or like a 0.91 second CC. So that's like a very significant duration increase, especially when people have tenacity, and it makes it a lot easier for people to follow up. So she'll be better at defending herself from ganks because she can charm, and that makes the person unable to pursue her as easily. She can charm to set herself up, she can charm to set other people up, and all of that will be easier for her. Every bit of it will be easier for her. So definitely a decent buff. I think she's in like an average place at the moment. Maybe she'll be slightly above average at best after this. Cassiopeia gaining a buff to her Q's base damage and AP ratio. Most people still max E. Maybe you could max Q if you really wanted lane priority, but then you're reliant on like a skill shot, whereas like E, if you ever land like one of these, or if they're standing in W, you can just do like an obscene amount of like untradeable damage while they're within your range. So most people are going to do E still. Like, this isn't going to change that or anything. If Cassiopeia becomes even a little bit better, I assume that she could see play mid and in bot lane, because she has a little bit of sustain for bot lane, in addition to the fact that she has really good sustain damage, and she's able to kill people really reliably. Like post 6, she can ult, lay down like a W, they can't flash or anything, and her like potential kill threat is like really high, so she can convert those kills that like bot lane mages need to be able to break open the map so that they can like get their champion to work, because the mages don't work when they're in lane. They normally lose the lane, but once they get out of lane, or they can make like a power play and then enable themselves to move, then that's when they're really strong. Because mid game they're really powerful. When they hit 6, they're really powerful, but they can't sit there and just like lane against auto attackers for like an extended period, unless you're something like Heimerdinger, then you might get the turn instead. So Corki's getting 40 damage on his Gatling gun at level 1. I assume this will mean that most people will take this at level 1, because you can auto during it. 40 damage at level 1 is actually very significant. This is going up to 8 magic resistant armor reduction rather than 4 at full stacks, which is actually a very significant amount of armor and magic resist reduction too. It stays the same as the game progresses, and Valkyrie doesn't really scale well at ranks, so you're going to be maxing this second regardless. But levels like 1 through 10, this will actually be like a really impactful buff, and I assume that this means he'll start this level 1. It'll also help his wave clear a little bit early, because 40 more base damage, if you're taking this early, then there you go. But this means that like Corki could take this into like a short range champion potentially, and really punish them for being short range and having to eat like Gatling gun damage plus his auto attacks. So Elise is gaining base health. I love Elise. Oh, health growth. So this means like she'll gain like 5 to 10% like health as like the game progresses, which is actually fairly meaningful, all things considered. Actually, it's probably gonna be like 5 to 8%. Like 10% would be ridiculous. So Elise has this problem where like going into mid game, if she's not like super ahead, she has like a really hard time like finding her role. Whereas like if she is ahead, like you can like push tempo, and then they have to face check you. Then like your cocoon becomes more valuable. But if she falls behind in like a game, then it becomes really hard for her. But with the current pace of games, Elise is basically always going to be on like the fringe of like seeing play. So if she gets like a meaningful buff to like her mid game, then I think like Elise will see like plenty of play. So this could be enough to like push Elise back into competitive play. People love Elise in competitive play. Her W is vision. She has reliable ganks. Her pressure is crazy. Her dives are super reliable, and she's like a magic damage threat, which are very rare in the jungle too. So she's extremely valuable, and when she is viable, she tends to take over competitive play. Nasus. So I don't like when they do changes like this, where they buff a part of a champion that's supposed to be like part of his weakness, but I don't think this is like a meaningful change anyway. So I'm not even going to talk really much about this. Like, I don't like when you buff like something about a champion that's supposed to be weak. He's supposed to be weak early, and like this gives him more sustain for that. But I don't think this makes a big difference. So Nasus will be about the same. So I've already seen some Pantheon jungles, and I don't think he's bad. Giving him attack speed at level 1, this means that he'll get his W trigger up more often, because if he's auto-attacking more often, then he'll get the shield up more often, which is a big boon for him. In addition, this 10 damage, you're normally spamming this in the jungle, so you can also get the shield from this, so that is also impactful. He should take significantly less, not significantly, like a little bit less damage in the jungle from this attack speed change. It will also speed up his clear just slightly. But I don't think that this like makes him like super competitive. I think he still loses to like a lot of the champions, like, because if you wanted an early game ganker, you would probably just go something like Xin Zhao, which will scale better into the game than Pantheon will, and at the same time as scaling better into the game, it'll also be able to pick fights really reliably early game. Right? It's just as strong early, if not slightly less reliable, but then it scales so much better and is so much more reliable as the game progresses, and it has a role later in the game. Rek'Sai, damage buffs. Rek'Sai's problems are not damage. These will be a slight buff to Rek'Sai. This is 0.3 actually, not 0.1, because this can hit 3 times in a normal combo. You'll auto Q, get another Q, yeah, you'll auto Q, then you'll get another auto in, and then another auto in, and then after the second one you can E. So you can, I mean, ideally your combo is like you burrowed Q, then pop up, and then auto Q, and then you're at 75. Then you get one more auto in, then you E immediately, so that you don't waste any time on your next auto, and then you Q again. Then you get the last Q in. So, and then you would R if you need to. So in theory, this can be up to 0.55 bonus attack damage buff to Rek'Sai, but Rek'Sai's damage is already insane. Those aren't the problems that Rek'Sai has, so Rek'Sai will have the same problems as previously, but be even harder to fight early, especially once Rek'Sai gets like a warrior or something. So. Boomerang Blade. Sivir's already considered like a counterpick to like Heimerdinger that I think some people have been exploring, so I'm interested if this will like help her in that regard. Boomerang Blade does a ton of damage early. It's one of the highest base damage spells in the game, so this is a super impactful buff in that way. I think she has a problem where like she can't contest some of the champions that are in bot lane at the moment, like Swain and Vlad, and so that's more of a problem for her than like necessarily her cooldowns or anything about her power. So I think she has like a meta problem separate from her own power. Vel'koz, a damage buff, doesn't really do anything for like the champion, I don't think. He might still see like extremely fringe play as like a counter pick from like long range and like being able to wave clear reliably, but I don't think this changes almost anything about Vel'koz. Vel'koz's damage retarded as is, so it's gonna be silly after the fact too. Vayne's problem isn't that she lacks damage, because she has a really good steroid and her W is good, but the problem is that, like, there's a lot of targets they'll be like running in like these clustered fights at the moment, and so she can't reliably like trigger this, and even if she can, like, there's a lot of champions that have damage that she can't do anything about, like Vlad and Swain, that just do damage by you being near them and like clicking on you. So don't think that this really does anything meaningful for her in any capacity, especially in the current meta, but this could be like a buff that like you'll feel a little bit more like after the meta changes back to like front to back, where she can just tunnel into one person and just destroy their health with her percentage max health true damage. But at the moment, I don't think this is meaningful. Vi, I would like to see Vi used into like funneling comps and stuff, especially if it's like Kai'Sa or something, not like Xayah obviously, because Xayah could just ult it, but because she guarantees that you get access to a person, then they can't like QSS it or deal with it in like a meaningful way. So she can guarantee like 2 seconds of CC on somebody and a meaningful amount of damage, plus her early game ganks are pretty decent, and she can like clear alright. So I don't think she's like in any bad place. I think she'll be pretty good as a jungler in solo queue after this, and I would like to see her as a competitive play pick into like certain things where like they have like mono damage type or like mono damage threats. There we go. So Mundo, I don't think this really affects him. He's still going to be really hard to deal with, and he's like the gateway of top lane right now, where if you can't deal with Mundo, then like you kind of just can't go there if he's up, because he can just run you down and kill you with like with reckless abandon. Basically the only champions that work in him right now are like Gangplank, who can still get ran over if things start to go poorly, Gnar, who can hold it down but then has to build really aggressively, so if Gnar builds that aggressively, he loses a lot of his team fight potential, and then Darius is the other one where like you can threaten dives on him really reliably, and it gives Darius like a free lane to be able to scale into the game like pretty safely, and Darius can like win the fight at most stages of the game, but eventually will lose in a really extended fight. Rakan, this is a slight nerf. I mean, not much to say about it. It's just a slight nerf to like cooldown. This is interesting because I don't think people are putting like points into Q that much. They're putting like, some people put 3 points into Q, but most people are maxing W. Some people even like maxing W then E. So this won't be as felt as it seems, but people, I think a lot of people do max Q seconds, so like this could be felt in that regard. But I don't think this is as big as like is a huge nerf, and this isn't a huge nerf. They're just hurting like his availability a little bit and his durability a little bit with this, but his durability is not going to matter because that's mostly early in the game, and it's the same cooldown early. So this is the only actual real nerf here. Sejuani's been pretty reliable and been picking up a lot of steam. I don't know if she's picked up so much steam that I would have warranted a nerf this early after like the changes to her, but she has seen some play, but she hasn't been like a super contested pick, so I don't know if this is necessary based on like, because this is like the range that you throw your R. I mean, it won't hurt most scenarios. I don't think it's like killing her off or anything, but I don't know like why this is necessary. Shen, so Shen support is the more common thing that you see right now. Sometimes people play Shen top lane, but it's mostly Shen support, and he gets to other lanes that way. And his Q does too much early for too little. Like, it gives him too much damage for free, plus it gives him this pretty decent sized slow, so they're just trying to hurt his utility a little bit, so he has to invest a little bit more if he wants that kind of power. So that's fair. This is more of a nerf to Shen support than it is to Shen top, because obviously Shen top will get more EXP and he can level up things that he wants to more easier. So Swain, nerfing the max damage on his Demon Flare. This is fine, I feel like, because like the massive damage that it can do is actually pretty silly. He'll still be decent. I mean, he's still very hard to deal with during his ultimate, regardless of like the end damage that it does, and his laning phase is still relatively safe. So I think we'll still see some Swain. He might not be as hard to deal with, and he might be a little less punishing into melee teams than he is right now, but I don't think this removes him. 40 damage off of Talon's Rake. This is actually a pretty decent nerf because it hurts his wave clear pretty substantially, especially until he can get a Tiamat. If he gets a Tiamat, then he's delaying like his Duskblade, and so if he's delaying his Duskblade that significantly, then sometimes it can hurt him. But he's normally pretty free to build like Tiamat early, so like this is probably felt in these mid levels before you get to like this point, because by this point you'll probably have Tiamat anyway. But even so, like 40 damage like on the losing from like a fight, every fight that you have with people, and 40 damage from losing like on wave clear is pretty significant. Wukong, another 40 damage. Losing 40 damage on his E, this will hurt his jungle probably the most, but will also just hurt his like lane. I mean, it's just 40 base damage off the top because you always max this. I assume you're still going to max this because it's still the AoE. Like if you're jungle, you're still maxing this 100%. And you might be maxing this regardless in other lanes. I mean, Q's okay to max, but you have to E to the person to get the Q on them. So a lot of times, like, Q max doesn't do anything anyway. Like, maybe Q max could be viable into certain melee champions in top lane that have to come into your range regardless. But I don't really see it. A lot of people are still going to end up maxing E. That's because it is ultimately, like, your way in and out of fights. So definitely a decent nerf. He's been tearing up solo Q. Dude's a monster. He kills you with no counterplay. Zoe, base damage 60 lower and AP ratio lower. So a lot of the complaints with Zoe lately hasn't been that she's like one-shotting you necessarily with her Q, which is already bad enough, right? She'll hit you for 70% of her health with her Q. It's that she's doing like the other 30-40% of your health without doing anything, just by being near you, right? So this is, in my opinion, a fine nerf. This means that she's encouraged to actually use her combo the proper way and land her spells, rather than just like R next to somebody and they die from like 30% due to like her passive auto plus like W going off, and they just die to like nonsense, it feels like sometimes. So appreciate it. I don't like Zoe's design, so this is interesting too, because you get less gold from minions if you have a non-completed jungle item but you have the most gold on your team. So this won't affect most junglers because most junglers don't end up in a situation where they have the most gold in their team unless they're super fed. So in solo queue, most people aren't going to feel this, but occasionally you might feel it where like you're pushing out a lane or something and you're the most fed person on your team and you're just going to get less gold and be punished for being ahead, which feels really bad, and it's kind of a heavy-handed solution, and I hope they find like another way to do it at some point. But I'm not sure if this even destroys funneling in the way that they might want, because funneling is at its slowest early, where you don't get a massive advantage early over like other laners and stuff like that, but it really picks up after like a couple after you get like an item, after you like recall and stuff like that, after you get a couple recalls in. So after you get a couple of recalls in, then funneling really takes off. So they might not even have necessarily the most gold in like some scenarios early, especially like if they have this, they'll probably be bouncing back and forth between like having the most gold or not, because they're going to be hindering themselves so much. And then you can get a jungle item relatively early when you funnel. Like it can be like anywhere from like 6 to 9 minutes is probably it. And then you probably are normally still funneling for like the next like 10 minutes plus, like trying to get like as much farm onto that champion as possible. And the game is at a really slow pacing when you're funneling. So this this does hurt funneling. Like it objectively hurts funneling. It can also hurt like fucking random solo queue junglers that are getting really ahead, and then especially if they have like split pushing as a win condition. And they some of them don't even finish their jungle items, so they could just be punished for that too. But this seems more... this might not kill funneling, is what I mean to say. Teleport nerf's great. Everybody takes teleport. This is actually fine. No problem with this. Because even AD carries are taking teleport. Plenty of mid laners take teleport unless they need something specific like cleanse. Every top laner takes teleport. Some supports take teleport. Like, it's a little ridiculous. You should have bigger windows to take advantage of people not having teleport. Conqueror. So Conqueror is honestly kind of broken because it gives you the attack damage and it gives you like added damage on top of it, and it's like true damage where you can't mitigate against it properly. So champions that have been able to abuse Conqueror have kind of bullied out some of the other champions that want to use the other keystones. So a slight nerf to it is absolutely fine. I think I would prefer if they nerfed the true damage a little bit than the attack damage, because it's for fighters that probably want the attack damage. I think the true damage on it is a little silly and hard to play against, but like the attack damage you can still build meaningful armor against and have like a clear window against those champions. So Ghost Poro requires active placement. After a secondary rush, your current trinket becomes a Poro item. While either you or Poro is an enemy territory, you gain 5 to 20 or 5 to 20 ability power, 3 to 12 bonus attack damage. So early game, this might actually be okay. Like if you have like a high damage scaling champion with like ratios, then like this could actually be like a really meaningful amount of damage. Also, you get to choose where you want to put it now, and it stays there for a long time, I guess. Maybe it just stays there until like they go deal with it. But this seems pretty good. I would probably take this over like Eyeball Collector in like every scenario then. I think the Zombie Ward's getting buffed too, right? No longer spawns from friendly wards. Oh, so that's a pretty decent nerf to it. But it now gives you damage after you destroy an enemy ward. Okay. So now you don't get it from friendly wards, but you get a damage bonus. I think Ghost Poro seems like the clear winner here, because you can choose where you want to put it, and then you get like a meaningful amount of damage like in the meantime. Like it's not crazy, but it's meaningful. This could be good for like burst for like ganks and whatnot, but like you can't reliably like know that you're always going to be like killing wards to be able to get that damage buff. So both of those are interesting. I'll probably play around with both. And I guess that's about it. I tried to make this one a little more concise. Sorry that it sounds like I'm out of breath too. I did like a first take on this, but then I got interrupted a few times, so I just wanted to do like a second take on it real quick. But yeah, I hope this helps some people understand the patch, and I'll see you guys around. Much love.